Hey, what's up guys, Tony here, and you're watching another Project Cars video. This is the career mode. This is the Touring Car Cup, the Clio Cup. And so this is the second week, and it's at a track that I didn't know, and I'm just sort of barely getting to know it, because you get a half-hour practice, then you got your qualify session, then your race, which is 2 races. So you don't really get much time with the tracks, and so to learn a new track, for me at least, it takes a little while. But this is a track called, I believe it's called Snetterton. If you're English, you're probably like, oh my god, he just totally mispronounced that. But Snetterton is the best that I can come. I mean, it's not difficult, but that's what it looks like, Snetterton. I'm not sure if maybe there's a consonant or something that's omitted. But so anyways, it's an interesting track, and there are some corners that really screw me up. It's turn 3 and turn 6 are 2 corners that just really screw me up. And so actually I got pulled for the first race, but the first race I actually spun out twice, and so that's, I finished what, 8th or something like that. So that's where I'm starting mid-pack. And so this is the second race. This is the one with the pit stop, and it's also the one with the weather. So I wanted to show this race as opposed to the first race because it was clear, straight 16 laps, no pit stop. So I wanted to show the pit stop involved. So 3 things I want to talk about. I want to talk about the AI, I want to talk about the weather, and I want to talk about off tracks. So, actually another thing I'm going to talk about real quickly is I got my TrackIR to work. And like I didn't think I could do it because at first it wasn't working. I did some searching on the forums. By forums I mean the internet. And it's like iRacing just like totally came out like, oh, one of the forums. Like, I don't think there is a Project Car forum. But anyway, so I just Googled it. And someone said, oh, you have to use helmet cam. I was like, okay. So I was using helmet cam, and then I was going through, and there's certain aspects about helmet cam that I don't like. Like when you're in the helmet cam, it has this sort of forced depth of field, depth perception. So like the faster you go, your vision blurs out in front of you, so the near objects get all blurry, and then basically the point down the track is nice and sharp. And as you slow down, the focus like pulls back to the rest, to the car and to everything else, and it's really obnoxious because there was times where I was like looking in my mirror, and my mirror was like totally blurry, and it doesn't take into account, you know, where you're looking around. It's just like you're going to be looking this way, so it's not very dynamic. But basically what it is, that while I was going through there and turning off that motion blur, I think it's called, or whatever, dynamic blur, or whatever the hell it is, speed blur, whatever it is, I saw helmet on off. I was like, oh really? So I turned the helmet off, and by golly, the TrackIR works in sort of what I would know is like the normal in-car camera. It's wonky though, because like when you go to the pits, it switches you back to the primary in-car view. And so like I was looking around, I was like, why isn't my TrackIR working suddenly? And so I had to, you'll notice in the race, I switched views after the pit stop. I switched views a couple times to get back to the helmet view. I don't know why it does that. I like, if you want to stick in that view, like it shouldn't change you out of that view, but it does. Stupid. But alas, I got TrackIR to work, which is great because I'm really used to it now. And so when I don't have it, it feels like I don't know, like I can't look around the car. It's a weird, I don't know. I guess when you get used to TrackIR, it's just one of those things that when you lose it, you just kind of get irked by the fact that you don't have it anymore. So what I want to talk about is, I want to talk about the AI. I think I might have mentioned the AI in my last video. I don't really recall off the top of my head, but the AI itself, and if I already mentioned this, you know, pardon me for repeating myself, but the AI is, it's not very dynamic, and I really wish it was a little bit more dynamic. And by that I mean that there is a slider bar, and you can pick how difficult you want the AI to be, but it's really a guessing game. Like you're going through and you're like, okay, because for me, what I'm noticing is my sweet spot right now is between 85 and 90, and it depends on how well I know the track, because I don't want to stick it at 90 and 100 and just get my ass kicked. You know, I want to feel competitive, and so I had it. I actually think I dialed it back, because I had it at 90 to begin with during practice session. And then, because it's a track that I don't know, I'm like, there's no way. I don't want to get my doors blown off. I want to be competitive. I want to like race. So I dialed it back to 88, and it was closer. And I ran the first race. And what was driving me nuts is that like cars were just blowing by me left and right. Like I started in pole and I found myself back to like 6th and 7th, and just like, what, these guys just blowing by me. I'm like, what the shit, man? I was pole. Like, how are you guys just like blowing my doors off now in the race? So for this race, I have it set to 85, and so, like I said, it's one of those things where it's mostly a matter of switching it from race to race. And that's what I'm getting at. It's not very dynamic. I really wish what they would do is I wish they would analyze your lap times and sort of come up with an average of your lap time and set the AI according to your lap time. So the AI will be difficult for you to race against, but not so much where you're always, in last place, basically. And not so easy that you're always destroying them by, a certain amount of seconds. Like, it would be nice to find that nice balance. And I think with certain race or certain sports games like MLB The Show, I don't know if Madden does this, but I know The Show does it for hitting. They have a dynamic difficulty. So the more successful you are, the harder it gets for you to be successful. So you have to take more pitches and be a little bit more selective. And so it increases the difficulty, but not exponentially. It's small increments at a time. And then you get to a point where you're not progressing anymore, and then it starts to regress as far as how difficult the AI is pitching towards you. And so it would be nice to have that in like Project Cars, where there's a dynamic difficulty. So maybe you might win a couple races, and then it goes, okay, your lap times are like this, so we're going to bump up the difficulty on you automatically. And then if you start to not win races, or maybe you start to fall out of the top 5, it starts dialing it back. So I mean, it is kind of like a crutch. It's kind of like a handicap to keep you within the top 5. But when you're playing a game like Project Cars, you kind of want to win. Like it's really not fun if you're just getting your butt kicked, because this is not like a racing sim. This game, from what I can tell so far, and this is how I'm describing Project Cars, is that it fits the void between a pure racing simulator, so like iRacing or R Factor, R Factor 2, and arcade games like Gran Turismo and Forza, and anything else along those lines. So it fits rather nicely in this area in between. It's like this simcade, I guess you can call it like a simcade, where it feels like a sim, but it also has very arcade elements to the title. So that's what I'd like to see for the AI. I'd like to see a little bit more dynamic. They don't ever make mistakes. That's another thing I've noticed, is that it would be nice if there was programmable mistakes in there. Like the times that they do make a mistake, it's usually when they're dive bombing you, like coming into a corner. And that happened to me a couple times in this race, where I was so fearful of a dive bomb that I almost spun myself out, taking the last corner really wide. But they'll dive bomb, they'll cut that corner, and they'll hit you, and they'll bump and run. And maybe that's the British Touring Car Cup Championship. Maybe that's the racing style for that series, but I don't know. For me, it's like, oh my gosh, why are you bumping and running me? That's really messed up. And so I found myself like starting to partake in the bump and run, and a lot of it was just a little frustration from the AI. I'm just like, screw you, AI, boop. I'm gonna push you out of the way because you're really bugging me right now. But that's pretty much all I want to say about the AI. What I want to talk about is the weather right now. And so the weather is interesting because visually it looks pretty good, and I like the effect, and you can see it just getting more and more wet, and like the tarmac gets wet. Of course, you got rain all over your windshield. What I don't like about it is that there is really no noticeable impact upon your lap times. You can pretty much run the same way every single lap, and there's really no effect. I mean, maybe there's a couple seconds where you're a little bit slower. Maybe that has to do with the fact that there's like rain tires on the car. They don't really go about explaining the whole process of weather. It's just sort of there. So for me, it's more of a visual element than an actually like a race impacting element. And I could be wrong. It's just, like I said, this is really my first sort of foray into weather with Project Cars. So I'm not really paying that close of attention. I'm just kind of like, okay, it's there. It's kind of neat. It looks pretty good. But it doesn't really seem to have that big of an impact. And the other thing about weather is that it doesn't last very long. In this race, like once I pit, like the weather's gone. Like it was just like a short little shower and then it was gone. So I was kind of expecting the entire race to be, stormy weather, or maybe it's like it starts light it gets heavy, and then it finishes light. But it was like weather kind of goes away and then sunshine for the rest of the race. So I really wish that I get what they're doing. They want to see this sort of you know, to use dynamic again, but they want to see dynamic weather. They want to see, you know, come and go, but it just comes and goes, and then basically there's nothing left. The weather doesn't leave anything behind. You know, it rains for the first half of the race, but the track's like completely dry when I come out of the pits, so it's as if it wasn't even raining. So that, I think, needs to be worked on. I think that they could do a better job with making the weather a little bit more lasting, basically. But the last thing I want to talk about is off track. So as an iRacer, off tracks, and then even if you play like Assetto Corsa, if you did not disable the 5-second penalty when you go off track, off tracks are a pain in the ass. I understand the reason for an iRacing, I understand the reason for off tracks, and I understand the rationale behind it, because you're trying to get people to be cleaner racers. You want them to stay between the lines. It's pretty much sort of like a disciplinary tactic, right, to get people to do what you want them to do, to obey the rules, not cut courses, stuff like that. I get that. But I think with iRacing, they take it a little too far sometimes. There are certain tracks where you could get a cut course violation, but not an off track. In iRacing, you can get a lot of off tracks, just very small, just very, very small off tracks. And with a system that, like the safety rating system, it really hampers the experience, because you're trying to race hard, you're trying to have a good time, you're also trying to be safe, but at the same time, sometimes you just don't want to worry about off tracks. And that's probably why I like league racing now. It's just the off tracks aren't that big of a factor. You know, it's unlimited, it affects your championship points, but it's not going to DQ you from race like it will in the official series. So what I'm liking about Project Cars is they'll let you go off track. Like, they'll let you get a good 2 wheels off track before, you know, if you get more than 2 wheels off track, you're off track. And their penalty is weird. It basically invalidates your lap, and then it invalidates your next lap. So for qualify, that has a factor. You're like, shit, well, I want to qualify, so I got to stop going off track. So if you have 2 off tracks in 1 lap, it invalidates your current lap and then your next lap. So you're like, shit, okay. So you need to be cognizant of where you're on track for your qualifications, for your practice time. But for a race, it doesn't matter. Like, you go off track, no big deal. But if you cut the course, like, they'll tell you, like, hey, you need to keep it between the lines. They give you a warning first, which is kind of nice. I actually like that. So you cut the course, like, hey, keep it between the white and keep going. But if you are excessive with it, then I'm pretty sure they'll penalize you. I'm not sure. Probably like a drive through the pits. Who knows? I've never bothered to do it. I'd rather not. So I do like the off-track system that they have. It doesn't mean much for a race, but it does allow you to race hard and race aggressively, unlike, say, like iRacing or Assetto Corsa, where it really dings you if you go off track. Not as much as, say, Project Car or Assetto Corsa by comparison to iRacing. You know, like I said, you just get the incidences, and if you're an iRacer, you know what that means. But if not, it's just a hassle, and it really kind of hampers the experience. So it would be nice to see other sims incorporate this, like, 2 wheels off is still okay approach. But I mean, I'm not looking to see iRacing change because, you know, a video game like Project Cars comes out and a lot of people happen to like the off-track system. But it's just something that I noticed with the game that, as an iRacer, I said, you know what, I like that, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. So anyways, that's it for me for this video. I'm still trying to get more time in the game. I'm still trying to play it a little bit more and get my feet wet with it, so that way I can go ahead and do a very thorough review. So maybe the next week or so, I'll sit down and do a very thorough review and sort of bring all these little tiny pieces together that I'm going to talk about and put together in one video. So as always, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I shall talk to you guys later.